It is crazy to me that Ghost of Tsushima hasn't received more love and adoration than it has. 2020 was a year monopolized by a couple of high-profile games and the ensuing launch of new console hardware, and Ghost seemed to come and go as fast as the wind. It eventually won the Player's Choice Award, but I feel like it really never got the attention it deserved from everyone else. Ghost presents an absolutely gorgeous samurai adventure that combines fiction and the colored history of the Mongol invasion of Japan. Breathtaking the world is at first glance up until the very end, mesmerizing in motion. Some say that Ghost looks like a painting, but a better description is that Ghost actually looks like someone watching someone paint. The game in motion looks superb, effortless and graceful, bright and colorful, rays of sun blasting in the distance, trees bending, flowers dancing, and the wind swimming in the air. It would be one thing if it was just window dressing, but it all serves a bigger purpose than eye candy. Tsushima's visuals act as a guide. Colors, wind, birds, pollen, grass, fireflies, they show you the way with ease, replacing the almighty yellow quest arrow that is all too distracting. It's the language of this video game, communicating to you without ever speaking. You're free from the obligation of a tiny trail of dots, that little mini-map, that invasive geometry. This freedom allows you to become a first-hand participant in this world, more than you could have ever been. Some undersell this point, but it's foolish to glaze over it. When you're playing a video game, your eyes can only focus on so much of the screen, and that usually tends to be the screen space that gives you the most information. That little box in the corner of the screen, or that compass that points the way. What gets left behind are two of the most important places on that screen, the periphery and the horizon. This is why you crash into things in front of you when you're driving a car, or miss out on details sitting on the side of the screen that the minimap is not. Your vision is just too preoccupied to react. It's like being robbed of immersion. Ghost has no such limitation. You let the game guide you as you scan the horizon. It's natural and easy. The end result is the same. You're pushed to where you need to go, but the journey is much more pleasant than staring at that dotted line. Without a compass, a map, or text plastered to the side of the screen to sidetrack your attention, you miss nothing and you just take in everything. Eventually, this subtle mechanic does something very interesting. It takes hold of you, it becomes part of you, and you start to realize you can get to places faster than you would have by staring at a map. That's because there's no delay in this game between viewing the screen and making a decision. It happens at the same time without you ever needing to think about it. When you jump on a horse, a gust of wind points you in the right direction and you just go. The most beautiful and ironic part though is that you eventually realize you don't even need Tsushima's wind. You just follow the motion of the world once you learn to speak its language. And at that moment, exploring the beauty of its world becomes intoxicating and painless. It makes some of the game's more repetitive side activities like fox shrines, bamboo challenges, haiku, etc. tolerable because the game looks so damn good, and it is so relaxing to explore. Negative space, however, is a problem. Sometimes Ghost doesn't give much of a reason to explore the far perimeters of its game world, both in terms of rewards, landmarks, and organic events that make the game feel alive, because honestly, it's not that dynamically interesting despite its zen-like beauty, and that can set a precedent for players wanting to avoid going out too far. Not to mention, Ghost has plenty of unnecessary micro-missions to boost your reputation and legend, but they can come across as pretty throwaway in the grand scheme of the story. However, it's nice that the game doesn't litter the map with 500 icons and things to do, which ultimately is a much bigger detractor from enjoying a game story anyway. Essentially, Ghost tells the story of a warrior who must cast aside his honor and embrace the path of the ghost. It's the only way he can drive out the Mongols and save his people. Granted, Sucker Punch doesn't take many risks with presenting this story. It's very simple, straightforward, and one can say even very predictable, but that's also its strength. It's easy to follow, understandable, and doesn't get too convoluted or weighed down by a tenacious need to overcomplicate. And this opens up the game to focus on its core underlying theme without losing track of it. It's easy to get wrapped up in the fallacy that complex plots automatically equate to masterful storytelling, and that the more turns and twists the game takes, the better it is. That somehow saying more is saying it better. But often, the busier a game gets, the more tangled it can become and lose sight of what it's trying to say. Ghost gives you a very laser-focused and pleasant journey from start to finish, even though it's pretty predictable, and gives you a very touching ending without getting misunderstood in the process. Carving through this 20 or so hour campaign will require you to engage in plenty of samurai sword fighting, and frankly the combat in this game is damn awesome. Ghost presents a mixture of stealth, melee fighting, and ranged combat depending on your playstyle, though in practice players will likely utilize all three in any given fight. The most surprising element of this combat system is that there is no lock-on feature, which I see as both good and bad. The point of removing lock-on was that players would be able to keep a better eye out on enemies coming from behind or to the side, as the game focuses heavily on multi-enemy encounters. In practice, the free camera does accomplish this, allowing Jin a more wide angle from which to assess and react to threats. However, it does feel at times that you are at the mercy of the soft lock-on system, which sometimes feel like it can make targeting a little bit more clumsy than it needs to be. It's an interesting exclusion considering most other games that do have lock-on mechanics, such as Bloodborne, allow you to simply disable it should you want more control over the battlefield. This freedom allows players to approach combat encounters from entirely new angles and use different tactics should they learn to master it. Ghost instead decides to remove this process from the equation and decide for you, and allow you to move freely as it assists you with a pseudo soft lock-on when you physically face an enemy. It's not something that I would say enhances the game in any way, but I'm also in the school of thought that it doesn't diminish the combat either. It's just a matter of preference and what feels better to each individual player. Either way, it's a bold omission and stands out as one of the more risky implementations of the game for good or bad. Still, combat is absolutely fantastic. Vicious, savage, and heavy Jin strikes feel deadly, and it's so damn satisfying when you eviscerate someone in this game or lop off a general's head with a single clean strike. Ghost has a very nice physical sensation and feedback system to the sword fighting, and in my 40 hours of total playtime, I never got tired of killing anyone in this game. It's a fast, exciting hybrid of many third-person combat systems, yet fairly challenging and punishing, even though you can quickly become overpowered by the end of Act 2. But it has much more of a learning curve to it, with a variety of different button combinations to learn, special moves, throwables, blow darts, weapon arts, and combos. Not to mention the constant switching of sword dances depending on what enemies you're facing. It's a little overbearing at first, but once you get comfortable with the tools you have, the power you feel is quite awesome, as the sword fighting evolves into a beautiful dance of sword flurries, parries, and combos. I can't remember the last time I enjoyed a title's core gameplay this much. Boss fights don't fare as well though, despite them having superb presentations and scenery such as a beachside duel under the cover of rain and crashing ocean waves. They felt very repetitive and lacked the deep gameplay mechanics you would expect from one-on-one fighting, even though they can be emotional, cinematic, and poignant as beautiful artisanal music dances in the background as you're clashing. Still, everything feels so polished in Ghost. From the crisp animations, the weather, the effects, the surprisingly good platforming and climbing, the absence of any bugs at all, to the fluidity of the movements and how NPCs match your run or walk speed in escort missions. That's actually a big deal. It's all exceptionally well done and feels very buttery smooth. And the surprisingly satisfying horse riding animation makes this process a piece of cake no matter what you do. With the FOV brought in extremely close and a strong sense of weight to the motion of the horse, especially when turning and stopping on a dime, it just feels so damn good. It's the kind of slick, seamless production quality that you find in games like God of War or Uncharted, which is surprising to see in this first iteration and hopefully not the last of this new property. What I love about Ghost of Tsushima is that it's a game for gamers. It's gameplay forward, it doesn't fuss around, it makes you feel present and engaged, it's polished, it's fun, and the ending perfectly wraps up the story without dragging on. It says exactly what it wants to say, albeit, which isn't very much, but it's affecting, emotional, and just downright enjoyable to play. It's not trying to be anything more than just a fun game, and I really appreciate that. There are plenty of things the game can improve on, such as physically allowing you to smash through shields, introducing a more sophisticated targeting system for striking, such as what was attempted in For Honor, and improving the camera work in cutscenes involving non-important NPCs. These unnecessarily and overly abundant pulled back wide shots, aka so they could save money on lip syncing, obviously, are pretty dry, although they do have some charm to them. Ghost also uses the samurai code very loosely in some instances, so if you're a stickler for historical accuracy or a philosopher of cultural appreciation, you're better off with another game. Technically, it's outshined by many other games. It's very simple and minimal mostly, relying on its zen-like art direction to carry it. Lastly, some more variety in the missions would help out too. But the grace, smoothness, and just pure fun to which the entire game plays makes up for most of these mild nuisances. The most important part about any video game is that it's fun to play and compelling to see until the end. For a first pass at a brand new idea, Ghost does not forget this. And if you missed it, I would highly encourage you to pick up Ghost of Tsushima if you enjoy these types of games, as it's one of 2020's most underrated and just pure fun games.